The glass hit the table with a sharp crack. Ice water spread across the white linen in a slow, creeping wave, soaking the order pad, dripping off the edge, bleeding into the fabric of her uniform until the cold reached her skin. The entire restaurant went silent. Every fork stopped moving. Every conversation died. 50 people held their breath at the exact same moment, staring at the woman standing at table 12, with ice water dripping from her clothes. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't step back. Selena Morrow stood completely still, her spine straight, her chin level, her eyes locked on the man who had just done it, the man who was smiling like he had won something. And then she spoke. 6 words. Quiet enough that only he could hear. 6 words that made the color drain from Clifton Bassett's face faster than the water had spread across that table. The whole room watched him go pale. And nobody understood why. Not yet. But they were about to. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome. Before we go any further, if you are new here, please hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is one you do not want to walk away from halfway through. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from tonight. Are you in Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, Detroit, somewhere overseas? We love seeing your locations light up in the comments. Now settle in, because what happened inside Monarch Grille on a Friday night in Atlanta is a story about dignity, patience, and what happens when the wrong woman decides she has been quiet long enough. This is her story, and we are going to tell every single part of it. Atlanta moves fast. It does not wait for anyone. It does not slow down for grief, for setbacks, for the kind of quiet devastation that does not show on a person's face, but lives somewhere deep behind their eyes. Atlanta keeps moving, and the people who survive it learn to move with it, even when their legs are tired, even when their hearts are heavier than anything they should have to carry alone. Selena Morrow had been carrying a heavy heart for 2 years. She woke up every morning at 5:15. Not because an alarm told her to, because her body had learned somewhere, in the long months of surviving, that the early hours belonged to her. Before the world asked anything of her. Before the weight of the day settled onto her shoulders. Those first 45 minutes, the sky still dark outside the window of their small apartment on Beecher Street. The city still breathing slow, those minutes were hers. She would make coffee, stand at the kitchen window, watch the streetlights flicker over the wet pavement below. And then without fail, a small voice would come padding down the hallway. "Mama, you're up already." Zoe, 7 years old. Gap-toothed smile. Hair always slightly wild, no matter how carefully Selena braided it the night before. She had her mother's eyes, dark and steady, the kind of eyes that took in a room before they reacted to it. She had her grandfather's laugh, big and sudden and completely without apology. Selena would open her arms, and Zoe would walk straight into them, still half asleep, pressing her face into her mother's side like she was finding her place in the world all over again. "I'm always up early, baby." "I know. I just like checking." Those mornings were the reason Selena kept going. Not hope, not plans, not the future she was slowly rebuilding. Zoe, just Zoe. In the back bedroom, Nana Ruth slept a little later. 71 years old, sharp as a tack, and the woman who had raised Selena after her parents' car accident when Selena was 9. Nana Ruth had worked as a seamstress for 30 years. Her hands showed its strong, careful hands, slightly curved now from arthritis. She moved slower than she used to. Her knees gave her trouble. The doctor had mentioned her heart gently in the way doctors mention things they want you to start worrying about without saying the word yet. Selena paid those medical bills. Every single one. Which was part of why she was a waitress. Monarch Grille sat on Peachtree Street, in the heart of Buckhead, Atlanta's upscale district, where the buildings were glass and steel and the restaurants had wine lists the size of small novels. The dining room seated 120 guests. The walls were a deep charcoal gray with warm gold lighting. The tablecloths were white linen, changed between every service. The menu changed seasonally. It was the kind of place where people came to be seen, where business deals were celebrated over $40 entrees, where someone's engagement or promotion or anniversary became the backdrop for their most expensive night of the year. Selena had worked there for 18 months. She was without question the best server on the floor. Derek Okafor, the general manager, 38 years old, careful fare. The kind of manager who remembered his staff's children's names, had told her so directly on 3 separate occasions. Her tables had the highest satisfaction scores. Her regulars asked for her by name. She remembered orders without writing them down, anticipated needs before guests voiced them, and handled difficult customers with a composure that other staff members quietly studied. Nobody on that floor knew what she had been before this. She kept that locked away, told no one. Smiled, refilled water glasses, carried plates, counted tips at the end of the night, took the bus home to Beecher Street, and did it all again the next day. She was surviving, methodically, quietly, with both hands. In the corner of the dining room at a small 2-top table near the window sat Coach Earl Dupree, 61 years old, broad shoulders that had carried decades of responsibility, silver close-cropped hair, a face that had seen enough of life to stop being surprised by most of it, but hadn't stopped caring, which was the more difficult thing. He had coached high school football for 31 years at Westside Academy, retired now. Every Friday evening without fail, he came to Monarch Grille, ordered the same thing: blackened catfish, collard greens, sweet tea, and a slice of pecan pie that he claimed he was going to stop ordering and never did. When Selena passed his table, he always nodded. She always nodded back. They did not have long conversations. They did not need to. Coach Earl had been her father's closest friend for over 20 years. He had stood at her father's graveside 14 months ago in the rain, holding his hat in both hands, not speaking because there was nothing adequate to say. He knew who Selena was. He knew what had been done to her. And he knew things about Clifton Bassett that he had been carrying quietly for a very long time. Tonight he had arrived at 6:30. Earlier than usual, he ordered his sweet tea, opened the small notebook he always brought. And then he looked up at the door. Back in her apartment earlier that afternoon, Selena had stood in front of her closet for a long moment. On the top shelf behind a folded blanket was an envelope. It had arrived 8 days ago. Georgia State Bar Association, official seal. Her name typed precisely on the front, Selena D. Morrow, in the formal way institutions address people when the contents matter. She had not opened it. She knew what was inside. She had sat for the bar exam 4 months ago, quietly telling no one except Nana Ruth and Zoe. She had studied for 14 months after shifts before dawn on her lunch breaks, with library books and old case notes and a determination so focused it had no room for doubt. She just had not been ready to see the result yet. Or perhaps she had not felt she had earned the right to hope yet. She wasn't sure which one was true. She pushed the blanket back over the envelope, put on her uniform, kissed Zoe on the forehead, told Nana Ruth not to wait up, and took the bus to Monarch Grille for the Friday evening service. She had no way of knowing that tonight that envelope would find its moment. The Friday evening service started the way it always did. Smooth, controlled. The kind of professional rhythm that only comes from a team that has worked together long enough to anticipate each other without speaking. Derek moved through the dining room with his clipboard, checking table settings, adjusting a water glass here, straightening a candle there. The kitchen hummed behind the double doors. The bar was filling up. The host's stand had a waiting list by 7 o'clock. Selena worked her section tables 9 through 14 along the east wall with the quiet efficiency that had become her signature. She moved without wasting motion. She smiled without performing. She was present in the way that good servers are present invisible when not needed there the instant they were. By 7:45, all 6 of her tables were seated and running smoothly. At 7:52, the front door opened. She had her back to it. She was at table 11, describing the evening's specials to a couple celebrating their anniversary. A sweet pair, maybe in their 60s, holding hands across the table like they had just figured out something the rest of the world was still working on. Selena was mid-sentence telling them about the pan-seared halibut when she heard it. The noise. Not a loud noise. Just a shift in the energy of the room, the way a dining room changes when someone walks in who expects it to. A slight increase in the ambient attention. Heads turning toward the entrance, the host's voice going half a register more formal. "Mr. Bassett, good evening. Your reservation is ready. Right this way, sir." Selena did not turn around. She finished describing the halibut. She smiled at the couple. She told them she would give them a few more minutes with the menu. And then she turned. There were 6 of them. Clifton Bassett walked at the front of the group the way powerful men walk when they are performing their power, not hurrying, not looking around, moving through space as though the space had been arranged specifically for them. He was 52 years old and looked like money. Dark suit, no tie, the kind of casual elegance that costs more than formal elegance does. His hair was silver at the temples. His jaw was set. His eyes swept the room the way a general surveys territory. Behind him came Raymond Chu, his business partner of 11 years. 46 years old. Trim, careful, always slightly behind Clifton, the way a shadow is slightly behind a person. Raymond's face wore the expression it always wore in public. Composed, pleasant, revealing nothing. He had known exactly what Clifton had done to Selena 2 years ago. He had said nothing. He had signed the paperwork that formalized her termination and looked at his phone while he did it. Behind Raymond came 2 investors. Selena did not recognize older men in expensive watches, who laughed at everything Clifton said 2 seconds after he said it. And behind them, 2 women in dresses that cost more than Selena's monthly rent, talking to each other in the distracted way of people who are accustomed to being decorative. They were seated at table 12. Selena's section. She stood at the server station for exactly 3 seconds. Her hand rested on the edge of the counter. Her eyes were on Clifton's back as he settled into his chair, adjusted his jacket, said something to Raymond that made Raymond smile with his mouth only. 3 seconds. Then she picked up her order pad and walked to table 12. She came around the side of the table so that Clifton would see her face when she arrived, not from behind, not as a surprise. She had learned in 2 years of difficult customers that it was always better to be seen coming. She stopped at the edge of the table. "Good evening. Welcome to Monarch Grille. My name is Selena, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." The words were automatic, professional. Her voice was level. Clifton turned from his conversation with Raymond mid-sentence. He looked at her, and the world compressed into a single terrible second. She watched it happen on his face, the flicker of recognition moving through him like electricity. His eyes went from her face to her name tag, and back to her face. She saw the exact moment he placed her. She saw surprise, genuine, unguarded surprise lasting less than a heartbeat. And then she saw him decide. Not to pretend he didn't know her. Not to be uncomfortable. Not to ask for a different server or make an excuse to leave. He decided to enjoy it. The surprise dissolved into something cold and deliberate. His mouth curved. Not a smile, something that wore the shape of a smile the way a mask wears the shape of a face. "Well," he said quietly, just that one word, letting it sit there between them like an object placed on a table. Selena did not blink. "Can I start you with still or sparkling water this evening?" Clifton leaned back in his chair. "Still," he said. "For everyone." She wrote it down, moved through the rest of the table, gave Raymond eye contact for 1/2 second. She watched him look away first. The appetizer order came 15 minutes later. Selena delivered the burrata with heirloom tomatoes to Clifton's end of the table, a dish she had carried to dozens of tables, a dish the kitchen prepared flawlessly. She set it down with precision, stepped back. Clifton looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked up at her. "Oh, what is that smell?" Selena kept her voice even. "That's the burrata, sir. Fresh this morning with, I know what burrata is." His voice was flat, dismissive. He looked at the plate the way someone looks at something they have found on the bottom of a shoe. "I'm asking what that smell is. It smells like—" He paused, looked at his guests, looked back at Selena. "Poverty." One of the investors laughed, sharp, uncertain, the laugh of a man who wasn't sure if he should be laughing, but did not want to be left out. Raymond did not laugh. He picked up his water glass and looked at the window. The couple at table 11, the anniversary couple, had gone quiet. The woman's hand tightened around her husband's. Selena's hands were shaking, not visibly. Behind her back, where no one could see, her fingers pressed into her palm, hard enough to leave marks. But her face showed nothing. Her voice came out perfectly controlled. "I'll have the kitchen prepare something else for you, sir." "Don't bother," Clifton said, waving her off like she was a sound he wanted to stop hearing. "Just bring the entrees, and try to get it right this time." From the corner of the room, Coach Earl looked up from his notebook. His jaw tightened. He recognized the man at table 12 now, fully, without question. And he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and touched the small device that had been sitting there for 14 months. Selena had served difficult customers before. In 18 months at Monarch Grille, she had handled drunk wedding parties entitled executives who sent plates back 3 times for reasons that had nothing to do with the food couple's mid-argument, who took it out on whoever was nearest, and one memorable Saturday night, when a man had demanded she personally apologize to his business associate for the temperature of the breadbasket. She had handled all of it, quietly, professionally, with the same composed expression she wore right now. But this was different. And she knew it was different, because Clifton Bassett was not reacting to her service. He was reacting to her. Every complaint, every dismissal, every cold look that swept over her and away, none of it was about the food or the restaurant or the evening. It was targeted, precise. The way a person behaves when they are not having a bad night, but are deliberately trying to create one for someone else. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was doing it slowly, deliberately. The way a person takes their time with something they are enjoying. By 8:30, he had complained about the lighting. "Is it always this dim in here?" he said loudly enough for the tables around him to hear. "Or is this a special effect to hide how mediocre the presentation is?" Selena had offered to ask Derek about adjusting the table's candle arrangement. Clifton had waved her off. By 8:45, he had complained about the temperature. "It's cold in here. Do you people not pay your heating bills, or is that also beyond your capabilities?" Selena had offered to bring him a jacket from the coat check. He had looked at her as though she had said something amusing, and turned back to his guests without responding. By 9 o'clock, he had complained about the bread. "This is stale," he announced, holding up a piece of the focaccia, which Selena knew for a fact had come out of the oven 40 minutes ago. I've had fresher bread at gas stations. One of the investors nodded seriously. The other was on his phone. The two women at the end of the table exchanged a glance that lasted half a second, something uncomfortable passing between them, and then looked away. Raymond Chu said nothing. He cut his food into precise small pieces and kept his eyes on his plate. At 9:15, Clifton summoned Derek. He did not ask Selena to send the manager over. He stood his hand up in the air, not raised fully, just lifted slightly, 2 fingers extended the way a person signals for a taxi when they are not particularly concerned about whether it stops. It was a gesture designed to be seen, to communicate without words that whoever was currently serving him was not worth addressing directly. Derek saw it from across the room. He walked over immediately, his face professionally neutral. "Mr. Bassett, is everything all right with your evening?" Clifton did not look at Derek immediately. He finished whatever he was saying to Raymond, first letting Derek stand there for a 5 count before acknowledging him. "Your server," Clifton said finally, his voice carrying just enough to reach the nearest tables, "is incompetent. She has been inattentive, she has brought incorrect items, and frankly, her entire manner suggests she does not belong in a restaurant of this caliber." He paused. "I'd like someone else." Derek kept his expression steady, but Selena, standing 6 feet away with a water pitcher, could see his jaw muscle tighten. "I apologize for any inconvenience, Mr. Bassett. I can assure you that Selena is one of our most—" "I didn't ask for your assurances," Clifton said pleasantly. "I asked for a different server." The table nearest to them, a group of 4 women mid-40s out for a birthday dinner, had gone completely quiet. One of them was staring at Clifton with an expression that mixed disbelief with recognition. The kind of look that says, "I know this kind of man. I have met this kind of man before." Derek looked at Selena. His eyes held an apology that his position would not let him say aloud. Selena gave him the smallest nod. "It's all right. I've got it." But before Derek could redirect the table, Clifton spoke again. "Actually," he reached into his jacket pocket and produced his phone, unlocked it, opened the camera, set it on the table facing Selena, recording. "Leave her. I've changed my mind. I want her to stay." The shift in the room was immediate, subtle but real, the way air pressure changes before a storm. "I like to document exceptional experiences," Clifton said, smiling at his guests. "And this has certainly been exceptional." He looked at Selena, then directly, fully, for the first time since she had arrived at the table. "Carry on." Derek hesitated for one moment. Then, because Clifton Bassett's company had hosted 4 private dining events at Monarch Grille in the past year, because his name was on 2 charitable foundations that the restaurant's ownership recognized, because power in Atlanta opened doors even when it should have been shown them. Derek nodded, said, "Enjoy your evening, and walked away. Selena stood in front of that recording phone and did not move for 3 full seconds. She was aware of everything. The red light on the camera, the slight smiles at Clifton's end of the table, the silence from Raymond's end, the watching faces at surrounding tables, the weight of being made into a performance for someone else's entertainment. Her hands were shaking behind her back. Her face showed absolutely nothing. "Can I refill anyone's water?" she asked. Clifton smiled. "Please." At the corner table, Coach Earl had closed his notebook. He was not pretending to do anything else now. He was watching table 12 with the focused, quiet attention of a man who has spent 31 years reading situations before they became crises. He had seen Clifton produce the phone. He had seen Derek walk away. He had seen Selena's shoulders settle. Not slump settle the way a person settles when they have decided to endure something rather than escape it. He thought about her father. About the last conversation they had 3 weeks before the end, when her father had pressed a small digital recorder into Coach Earl's hand and said, "If anything ever happens to me before this gets right, you hold on to this. You'll know when." Coach Earl reached into his jacket pocket again, touched the recorder. Not yet, he told himself, but soon. He looked back at table 12, and Clifton Bassett, without any awareness of it whatsoever, smiled into his phone camera and kept recording. It happened at 9:34. Selena knew the exact time because she had just glanced at the clock above the service station when she turned back toward table 12 and saw Clifton's hand already moving. He did not reach for the glass in a way that suggested accident. He did not fumble or shift position or catch it with his elbow the way a person does when something spills without intention. He picked up the glass, his full glass of ice water condensation beading on the outside filled to the rim, and he held it over her order pad. And he poured it. Slowly, deliberately. The water hit the pad and spread immediately, soaking through the paper, running off the edge of the pad, and down onto her uniform, cold, immediate, shocking, against her skin, even through the layers of fabric. Ice cubes tumbled off the table and scattered across the floor with small, sharp sounds. The white linen beneath darkened in a spreading circle. The dining room of Monarch Grille went silent. Not the gradual quiet of conversations trailing off. Immediate silence. Total. The way a room goes silent when something happens that crosses a line, everyone present recognizes even if no one has named it yet. 51 people stopped moving at the same moment. Forks suspended mid-air. Glasses paused halfway to lips. A waiter near the bar stood completely still with a tray in both hands, staring. The birthday party women at the nearest table, the one who had been watching Clifton all evening, pressed her hand flat against her chest. Someone near the back said very quietly, "Oh my God." Clifton set the empty glass down on the table with a small, precise click. He looked at Selena. "Since your service has been so cold all evening," he said, his voice light, almost conversational, pitched just loud enough to carry, "I figured you should feel it too." A sound moved through the room. Not quite a gasp, not quite silence. Something between the two, the collective breath of people who cannot believe what they are witnessing. Selena did not move. For 4 full seconds, she stood completely still. Ice water dripping from the hem of her uniform. The ruined order pad hanging from her fingers. Her eyes on Clifton Bassett's face, and then something shifted in her expression. Not anger, not tears. Something older and quieter than either of those things. The look of a person who has been waiting, who has been patient for so long that patience itself has become a form of power, and who has just decided that the waiting is over. She leaned forward very slightly, and she spoke. 6 words, barely above a whisper. Quiet enough that the tables around them could see her lips moving but could not hear the words. Quiet enough that only Clifton and Raymond, sitting closest, could catch them. "I remember everything, Mr. Bassett." The room watched Clifton's face. They did not hear the words, but they saw what the words did. The color left his face the way water leaves a glass fast, completely leaving nothing behind. His jaw did not drop. His expression did not crumble. It simply emptied. Like something behind his eyes switched off. For one unguarded moment, the performance fell away entirely, and what was underneath it was not anger or arrogance. It was fear. Raw, unambiguous? Fear. Raymond Chu, seated to Clifton's left, had heard the 6 words clearly. His hand resting on the table beside his wine glass, went very still. He did not look at Selena. He did not look at Clifton. He looked at the window at the dark Atlanta street beyond the glass, and his face arranged itself into the careful blankness of a man who has just been reminded of something he has spent 2 years trying not to think about. He knew. He had always known. And he had chosen deliberately and repeatedly to know quietly. Selena straightened. She looked at Clifton for one more second, letting the silence between them hold the weight of everything it contained. Then she said in her full professional voice, clear and composed, "I'll get you more water." And she walked to the kitchen. The double doors swung shut behind her. The kitchen noise hit her all at once, the clatter of pans, the calling of orders, the hiss of something hitting a hot surface. Steam and heat and light after the charged stillness of the dining room. She walked to the far corner, past the prep station, past the dishwashing area, to the small alcove near the back door where staff left their bags. She set the ruined order pad on the shelf, and then the tears came. Not slow, not quiet. Fast and silent, the kind of crying that has been held back so long. It arrives all at once the moment it finds space. She pressed her fingers against her mouth. Her shoulders shook. Her back was against the wall, and she let herself have exactly 45 seconds of it. She counted the way she always counted in hard moments, because numbers were something she could control when nothing else was. 45 seconds. Then she straightened, walked to the prep sink, turned on the cold water and pressed her wrists under it. An old trick, something her father had taught her when she was young and overwhelmed. Cool the pulse points, baby. Give your body something simple to do. She washed her face, dried it with a clean towel. Looked at herself in the small mirror someone had hung above the sink years ago, slightly crooked, slightly spotted with age. Her eyes were clear. Her chin was level. She reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out her phone. She opened it, went to her contacts, and she called a number she had not called in 14 months. It rang once. Selena. The voice on the other end was steady, warm, and completely unsurprised, as though he had been expecting this call for a long time. "Coach Earl," she said quietly. "He's here." A pause. Brief. "I know," Coach Earl said. "I've been watching. You all right?" She looked at herself in the mirror one more time. "Not yet," she said. "But I'm going to be." Another pause. Shorter this time. "Stay steady," Coach Earl said. "I've got something. And tonight feels like the right night." Sighing, she lowered the phone, stood in the heat of the kitchen for a moment longer. Then she picked up a fresh order pad, straightened her wet uniform, pushed through the double doors, and walked back out into the dining room. The dining room had not recovered. That was the thing about moments that cross a visible line. They change the atmosphere of a space in a way that does not simply reset when the moment passes. The conversations at the surrounding tables had resumed, but they were quieter now. Lower the way conversations get when people are still processing something. And talking has become a way of managing discomfort rather than genuine exchange. People were watching table 12. Not obviously, not rudely, but in the way people watch something they cannot quite look away from, peripheral, careful, consistent. The birthday party table, the anniversary couple, the two men at the bar who had swiveled their stools at a slightly different angle, the waiter near the service station who found reasons to stay within sightline. Everyone was waiting for what most of them could not have said, but the room had the feeling of a held breath. Selena walked back to table 12 with the same composure she had carried out of the kitchen. Fresh order pad, shoulders back, eyes level. She set a new glass of water in front of Clifton without comment, and moved to check on the other tables in her section, working methodically, refusing to give the moment at table 12 any more weight in her body language, than it already had in everyone else's. Clifton watched her return. She could feel it. The specific quality of his attention, not the attention of someone who has been rattled, but of someone recalibrating. Her 6 words had landed. She had seen it on his face, and now he was deciding what to do with the fact that she had not broken, had not begged, had not given him the reaction he had come here to extract. She knew that look too. She had seen it in deposition rooms, in conference rooms at Bassett Capital during meetings where she was the only woman and sometimes the only black person at the table, and someone had said something designed to make her feel small, and then watched to see what she would do with it. She had always known what to do with it. Hold. Stay present. Wait for the moment that was coming because it was always coming. It arrived at 9:51. Clifton reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He produced his wallet, slim, dark leather, the kind of wallet that holds very little because it does not need to hold much. He opened it, removed a single bill, $50. He held it up briefly, the way a person holds something up to examine it, then looked at Selena across the table. And he crumpled it. Slowly, deliberately. The bill collapsing in his fist until it was a compressed ball of paper. Then he leaned forward and dropped it. It hit the floor beside Selena's foot with no sound at all. "Pick it up," Clifton said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, which made it worse. "That's all your dignity is worth. Pick it up and we'll call tonight even." The silence that followed was absolute. Not the silence of before that had been shock. This was something different. This was the silence of a room full of people who have just witnessed something they will not forget, and are not sure in the immediate aftermath whether they are breathing. At the table nearest to Selena, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, in a yellow dress, out to dinner with her parents, looked at the crumpled bill on the floor and then up at her mother's face. Her mother's expression was enough. The little girl's chin began to tremble. She pressed herself against her mother's arm and started to cry, small, confused sobs, the way children cry when something in the adult world reveals itself as ugly and they do not yet have the language for it. Her father put down his fork, picked up his napkin, set it on the table, stood up. "We'd like our check," he said to no one in particular. His voice was controlled. "We're leaving." 3 tables away, 2 women who had been on their 2nd bottle of wine and laughing all evening went quiet. One of them reached across and touched the other's hand. They did not speak. Near the bar, one of the 2 men who had been watching stood up from his stool, put cash down next to his glass, and walked out without waiting for his tab to be processed. Clifton did not look at any of them. His eyes stayed on Selena. The crumpled $50 bill sat on the floor between them. Selena looked at it. Then she looked at Clifton. Her face was still. Her hands were at her sides. And somewhere behind her eyes, in that place where she had been keeping everything she was not allowed to say for 2 years, something had gone very, very quiet. Not the quiet of defeat, the quiet of absolute clarity. She did not pick up the bill. She did not speak. She simply looked at him with eyes that held 2 years of surviving and a truth he did not yet know she was carrying, and she let the silence answer for her. From across the room, Coach Earl pushed back his chair. He stood up, 61 years old, broad-shouldered, moving with the unhurried deliberateness of a man who has made a decision and is no longer second-guessing it. He picked up his sweet tea, set it back down, left his napkin folded neatly on the table the way he always did, and he walked across the dining room toward the table 12. Every eye in the restaurant followed him. He stopped at the edge of the table, stood directly across from Clifton Bassett, looked down at him with the calm, level gaze of someone who has spent 31 years looking at young men who thought they were tougher than they were, and showing them without raising his voice that they were mistaken. He did not look at the crumpled bill on the floor. He did not look at Selena's wet uniform or her clear, steady eyes. He looked only at Clifton. "I know who you are," Coach Earl said. His voice was low, even. It carried to the nearest tables without effort. "And I think you need to hear something." Clifton looked up at him for the first time. His expression did not change. But something behind it did, a flicker quickly suppressed, of a man who is looking at someone and trying to determine whether they are a threat. Then Clifton smiled. The cold smile. The mask. "Sit down, old man," he said. Coach Earl did not sit down. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, produced a small digital recorder, black rectangular the size of a thumb drive, set it on the table in front of Clifton with a quiet, deliberate click, and pressed play. The voice that came out of the recorder was unmistakable, clear, assured. The voice of a man who was accustomed to speaking in rooms where his words were the last words, where what he said became without question or negotiation what happened next. 2 years had not changed it. The quality of the recording was good. Every word arrived intact, undistorted, with the ambient sound of an office behind it, the faint hum of climate control, the distant sound of a door closing somewhere down a hallway. "I need this handled cleanly. No loose ends, no paper trail that leads back to me personally." A pause on the recording. Another voice, younger, slightly nervous, the voice of someone taking notes and trying not to show that their hands were shaking. "And the charges, sir? What specifically are we?" "Whatever holds. Misconduct, insubordination. Fabricate a pattern if you have to backdate the performance reviews, get the HR director to sign off. I don't care about the details. I care about the outcome. She filed a report against me, and she needs to disappear. I want her license pulled. I want her terminated. And I want it done in a way that makes it impossible for her to come back." Another pause. "Her name again, sir?" "Selena Morrow." The dining room of Monarch Grille did not make a sound. Not one sound. The recorder sat on the white linen of table 12, and Clifton Bassett's own voice filled the space between the tables, bouncing off the charcoal gray walls, reaching the bar. Reaching the birthday party table, reaching the anniversary couple who were holding each other's hands so tightly, now that their knuckles had gone pale, reaching every single person in that room with perfect, devastating clarity. Selena stood completely still. She had heard the recording before. Her father had played it for her once 3 weeks before he passed, sitting at his kitchen table with his hands folded and his eyes very serious. He had told her he had a source inside Bassett Capital, a young paralegal who had been in the room that day and had not been able to live with what she had witnessed. The paralegal had recorded it on her phone and given the file to Selena's father before leaving the company. Her father had transferred it to the small digital recorder and given it to Coach Earl for safekeeping. She had heard it before, but hearing it now in this room, in this context, with Clifton Bassett sitting 3 feet away, was a different experience entirely. The words landed differently when the man who had spoken them was present to receive them. When there was nowhere for him to go and no version of events he could construct that would hold up against his own voice saying his own words in a room full of witnesses. Her eyes filled. She did not let the tears fall, but they were there, pressed against the inside of her composure, waiting. Clifton moved first. He reached across the table toward the recorder, fast, his hand covering the distance in one sharp motion. Fingers closing toward the device with the instinct of a man who has spent his entire career controlling information, and understands viscerally that the thing currently playing on that table is the most dangerous thing in the room. Coach Earl pulled it back. One smooth motion. He had been ready for it. He simply moved his hand back 3 inches, and Clifton's fingers closed on empty air. Clifton's chair scraped back. He was on his feet now. All performance gone, all pleasantness gone. The mask not slipping, but gone entirely replaced by something that was not sophisticated, or powerful, or polished. Just a man who was cornered and knew it, and had not yet figured out what to do about it. "That recording is illegally obtained," Clifton said. His voice had changed. Still controlled, but thinner now, the control of effort rather than ease. "It is inadmissible. It cannot be used. You have no idea what you're holding or what you think you're doing with it." "I know exactly what I'm holding," Coach Earl said. He had not moved from his position. His voice was the same as it had been, low, even unhurried. The voice of a man who is not performing anything. "And I know exactly what I'm doing. You're making a serious mistake." Clifton's eyes moved around the table. To Raymond. To his investors. To the 2 women at the end of the table who were both staring at him now with expressions he had never seen directed at him before. "This is a private conversation taken out of context. This is harassment. I will have lawyers. Mr. Bassett." Coach Earl's voice did not rise, did not harden, simply landed with the kind of weight that stops people mid-sentence. "Every person in this room just heard your voice say her name. Say what you wanted done to her, in your own words." He paused. "There is no context that fixes that." Raymond Chu stood up, slowly, carefully. The way a person stands when they are trying to make the act of standing look like a neutral decision rather than what it actually was, an exit. He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair, folded it over his arm. Did not look at Clifton, did not look at Selena, kept his eyes at a middle distance focused on nothing, the carefully maintained gaze of a man who has decided that the best thing he can do for himself in this moment is become invisible. "Raymond?" Clifton's voice was sharp. Raymond paused. "1 second. 2. "I have to make a call," Raymond said. His voice was quiet, toneless. He walked away from the table, moving toward the far end of the restaurant, and did not look back. He had known for 2 years. He had signed the paperwork. He had looked at his phone while he did it. And now he was walking away from Clifton Bassett for the same reason he had done all of it, because Raymond Chu's primary loyalty had always been and would always be to Raymond Chu. 3 people at nearby tables were recording on their phones. Selena could see the small screens glowing in her peripheral vision. She did not ask them to stop. She did not acknowledge them. She stood at the edge of table 12 and looked at Clifton Bassett. This man who had taken her license, her career, her savings, her father's final years, her daughter's stability, and she felt something shift inside her chest. Not yet. There was still something left to do. Clifton turned to her. His investors were frozen in their seats. The 2 women had pushed their chairs back from the table. The restaurant was absolutely silent around them, 50 people holding the same breath, waiting. "You think this changes anything?" Clifton said. His voice had dropped to something private, something meant only for her. The cruelty still in it, but underneath it now unmistakably fear. "You're still a waitress. You're still nothing. You have nothing." Selena looked at him for a long, steady moment. "Not for much longer," she said. And from across the room, a woman who had been sitting quietly at the bar for the past 20 minutes stood up, stepped away from her stool, and lifted her phone to her ear. She was not calling a friend. She was calling a newsroom. Selena walked to the center of the restaurant, not to the kitchen, Not to the service station. Not to the edges of the room where staff were supposed to stay invisible, functional, present only when needed. She walked to the open space between the tables, the natural center of the dining room where the light was warmest and the sight lines were clearest, where every person in Monarch Grille could see her without turning their heads. She stopped. She reached behind her back and untied her apron. Folded it once. Set it on the nearest empty table with a quiet, deliberate care, the way you set something down when you are finished with it, but have not stopped respecting it. Then she stood up straight and looked at the room. 51 people looked back at her. The birthday party table, the anniversary couple, the families and the couples and the solo diners and the bar patrons, and Derek Okafor standing near the host stand, with his hands at his sides and his face holding an expression that was equal parts grief and something that looked underneath the grief like pride. The 3 phones still recording. Coach Earl at the edge of the room, standing very still, his hands folded in front of him, and Clifton Bassett still on his feet at table 12 watching her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Because she had never, in all the time she had worked for him, stood in a room and claimed its center. She had always been at the edges. By design. His design. Not anymore. "My name is Selena Morrow," she said. Her voice was clear. Not loud, she did not need volume. The room was so quiet that a normal speaking voice reached every corner of it without effort. 2 years ago, I was a senior attorney at Bassett Capital Group. I was 32 years old. I had passed the Georgia bar on my first attempt. I had been with the firm for 4 years, and I had never received anything other than an outstanding performance review. She paused. Let that sit. I filed a workplace harassment report against Clifton Bassett in March of 2 years ago. I filed it through the proper channels. I documented everything. I followed every procedure I had spent years learning to follow. Her voice stayed even. 3 weeks after I filed that report, I was terminated. The termination came with fabricated misconduct charges, backdated performance reviews, falsified documentation signatures from an HR director who has since left the company and declined to discuss the matter publicly. A sound moved through the room. Low, collective. The sound of understanding arriving. As a result of those charges, my law license was suspended pending investigation. The investigation was conducted by people who had professional relationships with Clifton Bassett. It found against me. She took one breath. I lost my license. I lost my position. I lost my apartment. I spent my savings fighting a process that had been designed to be unfightable. My father, who spent the last year of his life trying to help me clear my name, passed away 14 months ago without seeing it resolved. The anniversary woman had her hand pressed against her mouth. Her husband had his arm around her shoulders. The little girl in the yellow dress was watching Selena with wide, still eyes, no longer crying. I have been a waitress at Monarch Grille for 18 months, Selena continued. I am grateful for this job. I am grateful for the people I have worked with here. She looked at Derek briefly. He nodded once, slowly. But I want everyone in this room to understand what brought me here. And I want everyone in this room to understand what is in that recording. Coach Earl walked forward. He crossed the dining room slowly, the recorder still in his hand, and stopped beside Selena. He looked at her the way her father had used to look at her, with the particular pride of someone who has watched a person survive something that should not have been survivable and come out the other side still themselves. Open it, he said quietly, just to her. His voice was low enough that only she could hear it. She looked at him. He nodded toward her jacket pocket, toward the slight rectangular outline visible through the fabric. The envelope. Your daddy worked too hard for that result to sit in a pocket any longer, Coach Earl said. Open it. Right now, in front of all these people. Selena's hand moved to her pocket before she had consciously decided to move it. Her fingers found the envelope slightly soft at the edges now, from weeks of being carried, the seal still intact. Her name still precisely typed on the front, Selena D. Morrow. Her hands were not steady. For the first time all evening, visibly, they were not steady. The envelope trembled slightly in her fingers as she worked the seal open, not tearing it, careful, even now, careful out of habit and out of the respect she had always had for documents and what they contained and what they meant. She unfolded the single page inside, read the first line, and the tears that had been pressing against the inside of her composure all evening, through the ice water, and the crumpled bill and the recording, and all of it finally came. Silently. Two of them tracking straight down her face, and she did not wipe them away. She looked up. I passed, she said. Her voice broke on the second word and held on the first, and that was enough. I passed the bar examination. I have been a licensed attorney in the state of Georgia for 7 days. The restaurant erupted, not in the controlled, polite way of a dining room. In the real way, chairs pushing back, people standing the birthday party table, clapping with the full-throated enthusiasm of women who understood exactly what they had just witnessed and refused to be quiet about it. The anniversary man was on his feet. Someone near the bar let out a sound that was not quite a word, but carried everything a word would have. Derek Okafor put his face in his hands for exactly 3 seconds. Then he straightened, smoothed his jacket, and started clapping too. Selena stood in the center of all of it, the paper trembling in her hands, the tears still on her face, not performing any of it, not managing it, just standing in it and letting it be real. She looked across the room at Clifton Bassett. He had not moved from beside table 12. His investors had both stood up. One was on his phone, turned away, speaking quickly in a low voice. The other had picked up his jacket and was looking at Clifton with the careful, measuring expression of a man doing rapid financial calculations about association and liability. The 2 women who had come with Clifton's party were gone. Selena had not seen them leave. They were simply no longer there. Clifton stood alone beside the wet tablecloth and the scattered ice and the crumpled $50 bill still on the floor. The bill that Selena had never picked up, and he looked at her with an expression she had never expected to see on his face. Not anger, not arrogance, not the cold, deliberate cruelty of a man performing his power. Just a man. Small. Caught. Finished. And then the door of Monarch Grille opened from the outside. 2 men in dark coats stepped in. One of them looked around the room, briefly located Clifton, with the practiced efficiency of someone who knew exactly who they were looking for, and said, Clifton Bassett, we need you to come with us. The 2 men in dark coats were not police officers. Not yet. They were investigators, one from the Georgia State Bar Association's Office of General Counsel, one from the Atlanta District Attorney's Office Economic Crimes Division. The woman who had been sitting quietly at the bar for the past 20 minutes was a journalist named Camille Osei, who covered corporate accountability for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. But before she had called her newsroom, she had called a colleague, a former prosecutor she had worked with on 3 previous investigations, who had called the right people. The case against Clifton Bassett had been building for 7 months. Not just Selena's case. 4 other cases, 4 other employees of Bassett Capital or its subsidiary companies who had filed internal complaints over a period of 6 years and subsequently found their careers dismantled through processes that bore in each instance a remarkably similar fingerprint. False documentation. backdated reviews. HR directors who left the company shortly afterward and did not discuss their time there. Professional licenses challenged. Reputations quietly, methodically destroyed. 4 women. Different roles, different years, different circumstances. The same outcome. The investigators had been looking for the thread that connected them. The recording was not the thread, it was the confirmation. The thing that turned a pattern of evidence into a name said out loud in a man's own voice with intent, stated plainly and without ambiguity. Selena had not known the investigation existed until 48 hours ago, when the investigator from the DA's office had called her directly and asked if she would be willing to speak with them. She had said yes. She had not known Clifton would walk into Monarch Grille that same Friday evening. That part had not been planned. Some things did not need to be planned. Some things simply arrived when they were ready. Clifton looked at the 2 investigators for a long moment. Then he looked around the room at the phones recording, at the faces watching him, at the empty seats where his investors had been, at Raymond's absence, at the crumpled bill on the floor, at Selena standing in the center of the dining room with a bar exam result in her hands and tears drying on her face and her chin level. He straightened his jacket. "I'll need to call my attorney," he said. His voice had recovered some of its surface composure, the reflexive dignity of a man who has spent decades believing that composure is the same thing as control. "Of course," the investigator from the DA's office said pleasantly. "You can make that call. We just need you to come with us first." They walked him out. Not in handcuffs that would come later after the formal charges were filed, after the evidence was processed, after the 4 other women were contacted, and their statements were added to the record. But they walked him out of Monarch Grille through the front door, past the host stand, past the waiting area, where 2 couples who had arrived for late reservations stood pressed against the wall, watching with wide eyes out into the Atlanta night. The door closed behind them. The dining room held one more second of absolute silence. And then from the birthday party table, one woman started clapping. It spread the way real things spread, not performed, not coordinated, just genuine, table by table. The anniversary couple, the bar, the remaining diners, Derek Okafor, who had spent 18 months watching Selena work with a quiet excellence. She never asked anyone to notice, put his hands together, and did not stop for a long time. Selena stood in the center of it all and did not quite know what to do with her hands. Coach Earl solved that problem by crossing the room and putting his arms around her, the hug of someone who has known a person since they were young, who has watched them lose things that should never have been taken, and who is now finally watching the ledger begin to balance. "Your daddy would have been so loud right now," Coach Earl said into her shoulder. His voice was rough around the edges in the way voices get when emotion is being held just barely in check. "So embarrassingly, beautifully loud." Selena laughed. It came out wet and broken and completely real. "I know," she said. "I know he would have." 48 hours later, Raymond Chu released a public statement. It was carefully worded, drafted clearly by attorneys who had spent considerable time constructing language that expressed distance from Clifton Bassett, without explicitly admitting knowledge of his actions. It spoke of being deeply troubled by the recording and fully committed to cooperating with any ongoing investigation. It announced Raymond's immediate resignation from Bassett Capital Group's board. It did not mention Selena by name. It did not mention the 4 other women by name. It did not mention the paperwork Raymond had signed while looking at his phone. Selena read it once, set her phone down on the kitchen table, and went back to helping Zoe with her reading homework. Raymond Chu's statement was Raymond Chu's business. Her business was in front of her. 3 days after the incident at Monarch Grille, the story broke nationally. Camille Osei's piece ran in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution first detailed, meticulously sourced, built around the recording and the documented pattern across 5 cases, including Selena's. Within 24 hours, it had been picked up by 2 national outlets. Within 48 hours, Clifton Bassett's $200 million deal, the one he had come to Monarch Grille to celebrate, collapsed entirely. Both institutional partners released simultaneous statements withdrawing from the agreement, citing ongoing legal and reputational concerns. Bassett Capital Group's stock dropped 31% in 2 trading sessions. His charitable foundation was placed under review by the Georgia Attorney General's office, pending investigation into whether foundation funds had been used to finance legal actions against former employees. On the 4th morning after that Friday night, Selena's phone rang at 7:15. She was standing at the kitchen window with her coffee, watching the street below when it rang. The number was an Atlanta area code she did not recognize. She answered it. "Miss Morrow, my name is Josephine Carruthers. I'm a founding partner at Carruthers & Webb. We're a civil rights litigation firm here in Atlanta. I imagine you may have seen some of our work." A brief pause. "I'll be direct. We have been looking for someone with your background and your particular experience for some time. I would very much like to meet with you." Selena set her coffee cup down slowly. "I'm available," she said. "When were you thinking?" That evening, she sat on the edge of Zoe's bed after tucking her in the familiar ritual, the same lamp, the same blanket Nana Ruth had sewn when Zoe was born, the same small face looking up at her in the low light. "Mama," Zoe said. "Did you win?" Selena smoothed the blanket, looked at her daughter, at those steady dark eyes that took in a room before they reacted to it. Her father's eyes. Her eyes. "We didn't just win, baby," she said. "We got our name back." Zoe considered this with the seriousness that 7-year-olds bring to important things. "Is our name good?" she asked. Selena leaned down and pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead and stayed there for a moment. "Our name," she said quietly, "was always good. We just had to prove it to some people who should have known better." She turned off the lamp. In the back bedroom, she could hear the low sound of the television, Nana Ruth watching the late news, the way she always did, the volume turned up slightly for her ears. Selena stood in the hallway between the 2 rooms, her daughter breathing softly in the dark behind her. Her grandmother's television murmuring ahead, and she felt something she had not felt in 2 years. Not relief, not victory. Something quieter than both of those things. She felt like herself again. But there was one more thing. One last piece that no one, not Coach Earl, not Camille Osei, not the investigators from the DA's office, not even Nana Ruth had known about, until Selena sat across from Josephine Carruthers 3 days later and laid it on the table. In the 14 months she had spent studying for the bar exam, working her shifts at Monarch Grille, and carrying the weight of everything that had been done to her, she had also been quietly doing something else. She had found them. All 4 of them. The other women Clifton had destroyed. She had found them through patience and research and the particular skill set of someone who had spent 4 years as a corporate attorney and knew exactly how to follow a paper trail. She had reached out to each of them carefully, privately. She had listened to their stories. She had documented everything, and she had already prepared the civil filing. 5 plaintiffs, 1 defendant. A damages claim that the attorneys at Carruthers & Webb, when they saw it, described in a conference room with the door closed as the most comprehensively prepared pro se civil filing they had encountered in a combined 60 years of practice. Josephine Carruthers had looked across the table at Selena for a long moment. "You built this case yourself," she said, "while working full-time, while raising a child." "Yes," Selena said. While he thought you were gone. Yes. Josephine had looked at the documents for another moment. Then she had looked back up. Miss Morrow, she said. Welcome to Carruthers and Webb. 6 months passed. Atlanta kept moving the way it always did. The city did not pause for any single story, no matter how large it felt, to the people living inside it. But inside the lives of the people who had been in Monarch Grille on that Friday night, things had shifted quietly, permanently, in the way that real change shifts things. Clifton Bassett was formally charged on 4 counts of fraud, 2 counts of obstruction of justice, and 1 count of witness tampering related to the original investigation into Selena's harassment report. His attorneys filed 3 separate motions to suppress the recording. All 3 were denied. His trial date was set for the following spring. His charitable foundation was dissolved by court order pending the Attorney General's investigation. The $200 million deal never recovered. Bassett Capital Group was restructured under new leadership, people who had spent years working under Clifton's shadow and said nothing, now scrambling to distance themselves from what his name had become. Raymond Chu cooperated fully with investigators. In exchange for his testimony, he received a reduced civil liability settlement and avoided criminal charges. He resigned permanently from the financial industry and moved out of Atlanta. Selena did not think about Raymond Chu very often. When she did, she felt nothing in particular, which was she had decided exactly the right amount to feel about a man who had chosen convenience over conscience at every available opportunity. The civil case, 5 plaintiffs, 1 defendant, settled 14 months after filing. Selena could not discuss the terms publicly, but Nana Ruth's medical bills were handled. Zoe's college fund was established. The apartment on Beecher Street was replaced by a real house with a backyard and a room for Zoe to spread out in, and a porch where Nana Ruth could sit in the evenings and watch the neighborhood move past. On the day they moved in, Nana Ruth stood in the doorway of her new bedroom for a long time without speaking. Then she turned around, found Selena in the hallway, and held her face in both of those strong, careful, arthritis-curved hands. She did not say anything. She did not need to. At Monarch Grille, Derek Okafor kept Selena's section exactly as it had been. Tables 9 through 14 along the east wall. He did not reassign them to another server. He told the staff simply that those tables were spoken for. On the wall near the service station, in a small frame that he had chosen himself and hung slightly crooked because he was better at managing restaurants than hanging frames, was a photograph. Selena at work, taken months before that Friday night by a regular customer who had asked permission and sent the print as a thank you. She was carrying 2 plates moving between tables, her profile caught in the warm gold light of the dining room, focused, present, composed. Underneath it, Derek had written on a small card in his careful handwriting, "She was always more than this room knew. Coach Earl came in every Friday evening without fail. Blackened catfish, collard greens, sweet tea, pecan pie that he was never going to stop ordering." He sat at his corner table and opened his small notebook, and was by all appearances exactly what he had always been, a retired coach, a regular customer, a man who came for the food and the quiet. But sometimes when a new server was having a hard night, when a difficult table was grinding them down, and their composure was starting to cost them something visible, Coach Earl would catch their eye from across the room. Just a look. Steady, unhurried. The look of someone who has seen people survive much harder things and knows with certainty that survival is possible. It was enough. It was always enough. Zoe turned 8 years old in the spring. Selena took the day off work, her first birthday off in 2 years, and they went to Piedmont Park with Nana Ruth and ate sandwiches on a blanket in the grass, and watched the city move around them in the particular way Atlanta moves on a warm spring afternoon, which is to say loudly and beautifully and without any apology. On the way home, Zoe held Selena's hand and swung it back and forth the way she always did when she was content. "Mama," she said. "Yes, baby. I want to be a lawyer too. When I grow up." Selena looked down at her daughter, gap-toothed smile, wild hair, steady dark eyes. "Then you will be," she said simply. "Will you teach me every single thing I know?" Zoe swung their hands one more time and looked ahead at the path. "Good," she said, "because I have a lot of questions." Selena laughed full and real and without reservation, and the sound of it carried down the path and out into the warm Atlanta afternoon and did not apologize for taking up space. There is a kind of dignity that cannot be poured out of a glass or crumpled like a bill or buried under false paperwork. It lives in the person who carries it, patient, quiet, enduring, waiting for the moment when the truth is finally ready to be spoken in a room full of witnesses. Selena Morrow did not survive 2 years of injustice by becoming hard. She survived by staying true, and when she finally spoke, she did not have to raise her voice. The whole room went silent on its own. Because that is what truth does when it has been kept long enough and finally finds its moment. It does not shout. It simply arrives. And nothing in the room is ever quite the same again. Thank you so much for staying with this story all the way to the end. If Selena's journey moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know, or someone you are, or someone you are still becoming, please leave a comment below and tell us. We read every single one. Drop your location in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from tonight. Are you in Atlanta, Detroit, Houston, Memphis, somewhere far from home, but never far from the people who raised you? We want to know. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because we tell stories like this every single week. Stories about dignity, about patience, about what happens when the right person finally decides that enough is enough. And if this story meant something to you, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it tonight. We will see you in the next one.